The glass shattered against the wall with a deft-thudding crash, spraying shards across the sleek conference room. Amelia stood frozen, her fingers still curled from where she'd released the water glass mere seconds ago. Her heart pounded so loudly in her ears that she barely registered the stunned faces of her colleagues, sitting around the polished mahogany table. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, the city skyline blurred into a haze of gray and silver as tears welled up in her eyes. 12 years. 12 relentless years of pouring her soul into this company, of working late nights when everyone else had gone home, of sacrificing weekends and holidays to meet impossible deadlines. She'd been the first one in the office every morning, brewing coffee for the team before most employees even hit snore. She'd mentored countless newcomers, helped launch award-winning campaigns, and saved the company from more crises than she could count. And now, standing here with her hands trembling and her vision swimming, she was hearing those words that would change everything. We've decided to go in a different direction. Her boss, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable behind his wire-rimmed glasses. The man who had once patted her on the back after successful presentations, who had called her his right hand, now wouldn't even meet her eyes. Instead, he focused on shuffling papers in front of him, as if avoiding her gaze could somehow soften the blow he'd just delivered. The promotion she'd worked toward for years, the one they'd hinted at during performance reviews, the one she'd spent sleepless nights preparing for, wasn't hers. They were bringing in someone new, someone external, someone younger. Amelia's mind raced back to last month when she'd stayed up 3 consecutive nights fine-tuning the quarterly report that secured the company its biggest client yet. She remembered skipping her niece's birthday party because there was an urgent project deadline. She thought about all the times she'd swallowed criticism without complaint, taken responsibility for mistakes that weren't hers, and smiled through exhaustion because she believed it would pay off someday. Someday was supposed to be today. But instead, Richard had coldly informed her that her contract wouldn't be renewed. He cited vague reasons about streamlining operations and fresh perspectives, but the truth hung heavy in the air between them. They didn't value her anymore. As silence stretched across the room, broken only by the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead, Amelia forced herself to breathe. Inhale. Exhale. The sharp edges of betrayal cut deep, but she refused to let them see her break completely. Not here. Not now. With trembling hands, she gathered her belongings, her leather portfolio, her favorite pen, the small framed photo of her family, and walked out of the conference room without looking back. The hallways felt eerily quiet as she made her way to her desk for the last time. Co-workers peeked out from their cubicles, their expressions a mix of sympathy and awkwardness. Some pretended not to notice, others offered weak smiles or muttered condolences. None of it mattered. What stung the most wasn't losing the job itself. It was realizing how disposable she'd become after giving so much of herself to this place. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket, notifications piling up from friends and family who must have heard the news already. Word traveled fast in corporate circles. She ignored them all, focusing instead on clearing out her workspace. Each item she packed into the cardboard box felt like another piece of her identity being stripped away. The motivational quote calendar she'd bought on impulse 2 years ago. The sticky notes covered in scribbled reminders. Even the tiny cactus plant she'd named Spike, which had somehow survived despite her notorious lack of gardening skills. By the time she reached the elevator, her chest felt tight, and her throat burned with unshed tears. As the doors slid open, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby, watching the numbers tick downward. Memories flooded her mind like scenes from a movie reel. Her first day at the company, nervously adjusting her blazer as she introduced herself to strangers who would eventually become colleagues. The celebratory dinners after landing major accounts. The quiet moments alone in her office, staring out at the city lights while wondering if she was doing enough. All of it led to this moment, walking out of the building with nothing but a box of mementos and a broken spirit. When the elevator dinged and the doors opened, Amelia hesitated. Stepping outside meant leaving behind not just a job but a chapter of her life. It meant facing questions from friends and family, navigating the uncertainty of unemployment, and confronting the nagging voice in her head that whispered she wasn't good enough. But staying wasn't an option either. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and walked through the revolving doors, emerging into the crisp autumn air. The streets were alive with the usual chaos of downtown traffic, horns honking and pedestrians rushing past. For a moment she stood there, clutching her box tightly, feeling utterly invisible amidst the sea of people. Then, as if drawn by some invisible force, she turned toward the park a few blocks away. Maybe fresh air would help clear her head. Maybe sitting on a bench surrounded by trees would remind her that life existed beyond the confines of fluorescent-lit offices and boardroom politics. As she wandered through the park, her thoughts drifted back to her early days at the company. She'd been so full of hope then, eager to prove herself in a competitive industry. Back then, rejection hadn't seemed like such a monumental failure, it had been part of the learning process. But over time, the rejections had piled up, disguised as constructive feedback or overlooked opportunities. Promotions given to others. Raises denied. Projects handed to newer hires. Each one chipped away at her confidence until she wasn't sure what was left. A sudden gust of wind sent leaves swirling around her feet, snapping her out of her reverie. She glanced up and noticed a young couple laughing together on a nearby bench, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the weight pressing down on her shoulders. Watching them, she felt a pang of envy, not for their relationship, but for their apparent freedom. Freedom from expectations, from obligations, from the constant need to prove oneself. She wondered if she'd ever feel that way again. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her back to reality. This time, she pulled it out of her pocket and glanced at the screen. It was a text from her best friend, Rachel. "Hey, I heard what happened. Want to grab coffee? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." Amelia stared at the message for a long moment before typing a reply. "Thanks, Rach. I'll take a rain check." Sending the text felt like closing a door, at least for now. She needed space to process, to figure out what came next. Continuing her walk, she found herself drawn to a small fountain tucked away in a secluded corner of the park. The sound of trickling water was soothing, almost hypnotic. She sat down on the edge of the fountain and set her box aside, letting her fingers trail through the cool water. A single penny glinted at the bottom, likely tossed there by someone wishing for luck. Luck. Was that what she needed right now? Or was it something else entirely? Her thoughts turned to Richard and the rest of the executive team. How could they justify pushing her aside after everything she'd done for them? Did they really think hiring someone new would bring better results than the loyalty and dedication she'd shown? Anger bubbled up inside her, hot and fierce, cutting through the fog of sadness that had settled over her earlier. If they thought she'd simply disappear quietly, they were wrong. Very wrong. But anger wasn't enough. It couldn't sustain her forever, nor could it undo what had already been done. What she needed was a plan, a way to reclaim control over her life and future. The problem was, she didn't know where to start. For so long, her identity had been tied to her job, to the company, to the idea of climbing the corporate ladder. Without that framework, she felt adrift, unsure of who she was or what she wanted. Still, as she sat there by the fountain, watching the sunlight dance across the water, a spark of determination began to flicker within her. Whatever came next, she vowed not to let this experience define her. She would rebuild, reinvent, rediscover herself. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find a way to turn this devastating loss into something meaningful. With that thought lingering in her mind, Amelia stood up, picked up her box, and started walking again. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since stepping out of that conference room, she felt a glimmer of hope. Karma, she reminded herself, had a funny way of balancing things out. And if there was one thing she knew for sure, it was that justice, whether swift or slow, always found its mark. Amelia walked aimlessly through the park, her mind racing with possibilities. The weight of her box felt heavier now, not because of its contents, but because it symbolized everything she was leaving behind. Yet, as she moved forward, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this painful, earth-shattering moment, might actually be an opportunity in disguise. She just had to figure out how to see it that way. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, she didn't ignore it. It was a LinkedIn notification. Richard Carter has updated his profile. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the app. There it was, a sleek new headline under Richard's name, Chief Executive Officer at Sterling & Company. A promotion. Of course. He'd climbed another rung on the corporate ladder while cutting her loose without so much as a second thought. Her jaw tightened as she scrolled further. His accomplishments were listed neatly, bullet points highlighting milestones he'd achieved during his tenure. But what struck her most was the photo accompanying his profile, a smug grin, perfectly tailored suit, and behind him, the familiar skyline of their office building. For years, Amelia had admired Richard. He'd been her mentor when she first joined the company, guiding her through the intricacies of corporate politics and helping her navigate challenges she hadn't anticipated. Over time, though, their relationship shifted. He became distant, more focused on climbing the ranks than fostering talent within the team. Still, she'd never imagined he'd betray her like this. She closed the app abruptly, her fingers trembling slightly. For a fleeting moment, she considered sending him a message, a polite congratulations laced with thinly veiled bitterness, but she stopped herself. That wasn't who she wanted to be. Instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of something her grandmother used to say, the higher they climb, the farther they fall. Karma, after all, wasn't always immediate. Sometimes, it lingered quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By the time Amelia returned home, dusk had settled over the city. The streets glowed orange from streetlights, and the hum of traffic outside her apartment window provided a strange kind of comfort. Setting the box down on her kitchen counter, she stared at it for a long moment before deciding she needed a drink. Wine? No, too predictable. Coffee? Too energizing. Finally, she settled on tea, something herbal calming. As the kettle boiled, she leaned against the counter and let her eyes wander around her apartment. It was cozy, filled with little reminders of her journey, framed photos of family vacations, a shelf lined with books she'd promised herself she'd read someday, and a corkboard covered in sticky notes bearing motivational quotes. One note in particular caught her eye: success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. She'd written it years ago during a particularly tough week, pinning it up as a reminder to keep going no matter what. Today, those words felt heavier, more urgent. The kettle whistled, snapping her back to the present. She poured the hot water into a mug, added a tea bag, and carried it to her couch. Wrapping herself in a blanket, she sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through her body. Her thoughts drifted back to Richard and the others who dismissed her so callously. How could they not see the value she brought to the table? Or maybe they did, and that was the problem. Maybe they were threatened by her competence, her dedication, her ability to outshine them if given the chance. As anger simmered beneath the surface, an idea began to take shape. What if she didn't need them anymore? What if she created her own path instead of trying to fit into theirs? The thought was terrifying yet exhilarating. Starting her own business had crossed her mind before, but fear of failure, or worse, rejection, had always held her back. Now, however, with nothing left to lose, the idea seemed less daunting and more necessary. Her laptop sat on the coffee table, untouched since she'd arrived home. On impulse, she grabbed it and opened it, logging into her email. Messages flooded her inbox, sympathy notes from colleagues, spam advertisements, and one unexpected email from someone named Claire Bennett. The subject line read, "Let's talk opportunities." Claire was a former client, someone Amelia had worked closely with on several high-profile campaigns. They developed a rapport over the years, exchanging ideas and strategies that pushed both their teams to excel. Opening the email, Amelia scanned the brief message. "Hey Amelia, I heard about your situation. I know how talented you are, and I think we might have an opportunity worth discussing. Call me whenever you're ready." A small smile tugged at the corners of Amelia's lips. This wasn't karma, not yet, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, the universe was aligning in her favor after all. Over the next few days, Amelia threw herself into planning. She reached out to Claire, who proposed collaborating on a freelance project. It wasn't a full-time job, but it was enough to get her foot in the door. Encouraged by the offer, Amelia began reaching out to other contacts, former clients, industry peers, even old friends she hadn't spoken to in years. To her surprise, many of them responded enthusiastically, offering leads or expressing interest in working together. One afternoon, while brainstorming ideas for a potential marketing consultancy, Amelia received a call from Rachel. Her best friend had been persistent, checking in daily despite Amelia's initial reluctance to talk. This time, however, Amelia answered. "Hey," Rachel said softly. "How are you holding up?" Amelia hesitated before responding. "Honestly, I'm okay. Better than I expected, actually." "That's great to hear," Rachel replied. "You've got this, you know. Whatever happens, you'll land on your feet." "I hope so," Amelia admitted. "I've been thinking about starting my own thing, a consultancy or maybe even a creative agency. It's scary, but it feels right." Rachel laughed. Scary is good. Scary means you're doing something big. And honestly, anyone who knows you knows you're unstoppable. Amelia smiled, gratitude swelling in her chest. Thanks, Rach. I needed to hear that. As they talked, Amelia realized something important. She wasn't alone. Despite the betrayal she'd experienced, there were still people in her corner. Friends, mentors, colleagues who believed in her. Their support gave her the strength to keep moving forward, even when doubt crept in. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, Amelia began building her new life. She rented a small co-working space downtown, where she spent hours drafting proposals, meeting with clients, and refining her vision. Word spread quickly about her talents, and soon, she found herself juggling multiple projects. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a victory against the forces that had tried to hold her back. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating about Sterling and Company. Rumors of internal conflicts, missed deadlines, and plummeting morale reached Amelia through mutual connections. At first, she tried to ignore them, focusing instead on her own work. But then one day, she received a text from an anonymous number. Looks like karma's catching up faster than expected. Curious, she opened the attachment included in the message. It was a news article detailing Richard's abrupt departure from Sterling and Company, citing allegations of misconduct and poor leadership. Allegedly, key clients had pulled out following his promotion, citing dissatisfaction with the company's direction. The board had reportedly lost faith in him, leading to his termination. Amelia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Part of her felt vindicated, justice served, but another part couldn't help but feel sorry for him. After all, she knew firsthand how crushing failure could be. Still, she couldn't deny the poetic irony of the situation. Karma, it seemed, had finally struck. But Amelia didn't dwell on it for long. She had bigger things to focus on now, dreams to chase, goals to achieve. Sitting at her desk overlooking the bustling city below, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Life had thrown her a curveball, but she'd caught it, and she was ready to throw it back, stronger and wiser than ever before. And as she turned back to her laptop, typing furiously on a proposal that would cement her place in the industry, she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. Months turned into a year, and Amelia's consultancy flourished beyond anything she could have imagined. What started as a modest freelance operation quickly grew into a full-fledged creative agency, with clients ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. Her reputation for delivering innovative strategies and unparalleled results spread like wildfire, earning her recognition in industry publications and invitations to speak at conferences. Amelia rented a larger office space, a sleek, sunlit loft overlooking the city skyline, and hired a small team of talented individuals who shared her vision. Among them was Claire, the former client who had reached out during Amelia's darkest days. Their collaboration proved invaluable, and together, they built an agency that prioritized creativity, integrity, and mutual respect, qualities Amelia had longed for but never fully experienced in her previous job. One crisp autumn morning, Amelia stood on the rooftop terrace of her new office building, sipping coffee as she watched the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. It was hard to believe how far she'd come since that fateful day when Richard had dismissed her so callously. Back then, she'd felt invisible, disposable. But now, she was unstoppable. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Rachel, calling to check in, as usual. "Morning, superstar," Rachel chirped when Amelia answered. "How's life treating you today?" Amelia chuckled. "Pretty well, all things considered. I just closed another big deal, and we're about to onboard 2 more clients." "That's amazing," Rachel exclaimed. "You've officially made it, haven't you?" "I guess I have," Amelia replied, her voice tinged with awe. "It's funny, I used to think success meant climbing the corporate ladder or getting promoted. But this feels different. Like I'm finally doing what I was always meant to do." Rachel laughed warmly. "You deserve every bit of it, Ames. Seriously, I'm so proud of you." As they talked, Amelia glanced down at the bustling streets below. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the late nights, the rejections, the moments of doubt, and realized something profound: none of it had been wasted. Every setback, every heartache, had shaped her into the person she was today. And while she wouldn't wish those experiences on anyone, she couldn't deny that they had made her stronger, wiser, and infinitely more resilient. Later that afternoon, Amelia attended a networking event hosted by one of her biggest clients. As she mingled with other professionals, exchanging stories and ideas, she noticed someone familiar across the room. For a moment, her breath caught in her throat. It was Richard. He looked older, wearier, his once confident demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that seemed out of place in the polished setting. Their eyes met briefly, and Richard hesitated before approaching her. "Amelia," he said, his tone cautious. "I heard about your success. Congratulations. You've done incredible work." She studied him for a moment, searching for any trace of insincerity. But instead of anger or resentment, she felt only calm resolve. "Thank you," she replied evenly. "It hasn't been easy, but I've learned a lot along the way." Richard nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I know I didn't handle things the right way back then. I should have given you the promotion. You earned it." Amelia smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe this was exactly where I was supposed to be all along." He looked taken aback by her response but didn't argue. Instead, he offered a tentative smile. "Either way, I'm glad things worked out for you." As he walked away, Amelia felt a sense of closure wash over her. There was no bitterness left, no lingering resentment. She had moved past that chapter of her life, and Richard's apology, however belated, was simply confirmation that she had made the right choices. That evening, Amelia gathered her team for dinner at a trendy restaurant downtown. They toasted to their recent successes, shared laughter over inside jokes, and brainstormed ideas for future projects. Watching her colleagues interact, their passion and camaraderie evident in every conversation, Amelia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what true success looked like, not accolades or titles, but meaningful connections and purpose-driven work. After dinner, Amelia took a quiet moment to herself, stepping outside onto the restaurant's patio. The city lights twinkled around her, casting a warm glow that mirrored the contentment in her heart. Pulling out her phone, she opened her notes app and typed a single sentence: "Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right." She hit save and tucked the phone back into her pocket, smiling softly. Karma had indeed struck, not just for Richard but for her as well. But more importantly, she created her own destiny, one built on resilience, authenticity, and unwavering determination. As she rejoined her team inside, laughing and celebrating the bright future ahead, Amelia knew she had found her happy ending. Not because everything had gone perfectly, but because she had risen above adversity and discovered the strength within herself to build a life she loved. And that, she realized, was worth more than any promotion or corner office could ever offer. The city sparkled around her, alive with possibility, and Amelia embraced it all with open arms. Her story wasn't just one of triumph, it was a testament to the power of perseverance, self-belief, and the undeniable truth that sometimes, the greatest victories come after the hardest falls.